in power, whether red or blue. I could not care less about Texas, me and you. They created this give me country that don't value hard work. For a Texan to survive, all we need are some seeds and dirt. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country, for it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country, for it's long gone. We believe in family and we value our community. Gladly lend a helping hand to a neighbor in need. And we don't believe that government should provide for all of society's needs. No, it's the pride of a Texan to give to others voluntarily. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Gotta save your country, for it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Gotta save your country, for it's long gone. They like our tax dollars and they love our natural resources. They don't want to see us driving trucks, they'd rather see us riding horses. And now they want to ban our guns, you know, especially the ones that look scary. But may I remind you of the Gonzales Cannon and the Alamo heroes we buried. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save our country, for it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save our country, for it's long gone. This last verse is straight from the Texas Constitution, Article 1, Section 1 and 2. Look it up. Texas is an independent state, yet presently we suffer. We no longer possess the right to locally self-govern. And now it's time as a people in which all political power is inherent. And in such manner we find expedient, we reform or abolish our government. I said, Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country, for it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country, for it's long gone.
Well, hello, fellow Texians. I'm Daniel Miller, and this is Late Night Coffee Talk, right? Week after week, every Wednesday, I am here with you, taking a break from my activities of the day to decompress and talk about, just things on my mind. And of course, today, what has been on my mind has been the election. Now, let me go ahead and do this. Go ahead and grab your cup of coffee, and we'll talk about get a little housekeeping out of the way. Then we'll get started. How does that sound? Because tonight we're going to talk about the election. So you're going to want to be properly caffeinated. Not that it's going to be boring, but there will be lots of numbers and lots of pictures and things of that nature. But let's get the housekeeping out of the way. First and foremost, if you are watching on YouTube, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Right, whether it's on my personal YouTube channel or the TNM's. These guys. Look, it's my TNM background. It's back. Yes. Whether it's either one of those channels, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and of course, chat is active in both. And on the TNM's YouTube channel, super chat is active, right? So if you want to send a super chat and make a contribution to the organization, all contributions there go straight to the TNM as always. If you're watching on any of the Facebook pages, be sure to like, comment, and share. And, if you're on Twitter, do the Twitter things, and Twitch, do the Twitch things. You know those. But as always, chat is aggregating. So if you send a message, a comment, whatever it is, in YouTube, on the YouTube channels, on Facebook, on the Facebook pages, we'll see those, right? And you get to be a part of the broadcast tonight. Now, let me go ahead and apologize for not being here for Coffee Talk last week. As you know, March the 1st was the primary election. March the 2nd, which is Wednesday, was Texas Independence Day. And while it would have been a phenomenal day to be able to do what we do here, right, on Coffee Talk, the fact of the matter is that we were at the TNM's tent at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, celebrating Texas Independence Day with some folks who came out. And want to thank the Brocks for putting that together for us and making that happen. And I do believe it will be a tradition from here on out. I think we're going to do a TNM event at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. So thank you to the Brocks. Thank you to everyone who came out. Thanks to Kara and Daphne and everyone who helped pull that thing together. Nate, matter of fact, I think there's some Facebook video of Nate playing guitar, right? Nate Smith, our executive director, at the tent. So I think there's some video circulating around on social media. You'll have to find it. I don't have time for it tonight. But my initial thought was, okay, look, I'll just push it back a day and we'll do it from New Hampshire, because literally the next day on the 3rd, I was scheduled to fly out, something that had been scheduled even before I announced the run for lieutenant governor. But I was scheduled to fly out to speak at the Liberty Forum in New Hampshire. So my thought was, cool, we'll get on the plane, we'll get to New Hampshire, I'll get to the hotel, I'll do late night coffee talk from there. That was until they backed up our flight for 4 hours. So didn't get it done then. So Friday, never a good day for these sorts of things. Saturday, Sunday, occupied with the conference. Sunday was the panel, and here I am back. We flew back in Monday, and I am so very glad to be back home in the homeland. Literally, as soon as we got out of Houston Intercontinental, first stop was Buc-ee's, right? Got to stop there. So it was really good to be on a highway where the speed limit was like 75, right? As opposed to where I was, we're on those highways. But I will say, very gracious hosts, lots of phenomenal people. And oddly enough, I met a lot of Texans up there. And it was super good to be around those folks and bring the message of Texas to those people. But oddly enough, while I was there, and I'll do a whole unpack of that whole panel. The video from the panel that I was on is actually on YouTube right now, so go check that out. And I think there's an article coming out about it on the TNM site. But literally while I was there, because we had just come off the election, as it happened on election day and every day since, my phone was blowing up about people just trying to figure out what happened March the 1st. Right. And when I got to New Hampshire, it was really no different, because I was asked by plenty of people there about what happened in the election. And literally, the question on everyone's mind right now is what happened on March the 1st. And so tonight, I am dedicating my entire coffee talk specifically to questions that I have been asked, and questions, frankly, we should all be asking about what happened with the elections. Because, um, results be damned. The fact of the matter is that so many of us look at the results and cannot make it jive with what we know the reality was for the last several months. Whether it's the reality that we saw on the campaign trail, whether it's the polling that leaked out, the internal polling from both Abbott's campaign and Patrick's campaign, or just our own personal experiences from those of you who were working the polls during early voting and election day. And we can't make sense out of it. And so if you've got questions, so do I. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to take an opportunity over this cup of coffee to explore some of the questions that we should all be asking related to the election. Because at the end of the day, the idea of having a representative constitutional republic is only a reality if we can be absolutely 100% sure that our elections are fair and safe and secure. And I'm going to tell you, tonight, as I talk about this, we'll talk a little bit about my race, right? But we're going to talk primarily about the election as a whole, because I think that gives some context. And frankly, here's the bottom line, folks. I don't mind. Let me self-edit. I don't like to lose. But if I lose fair and square, you won't hear a peep out of me about it, right? Other than the fact, dadgum, I'm gonna have to do better next time, or I should have done this or should have done that. But look, we left this campaign with no regrets. It's the speech that I gave at the watch party, and so there are no regrets where this election is concerned. Are there things we would have done, and probably do differently? Sure, but you don't regret those. But here's the bottom line. Tonight is about the election as a whole. It's not about my campaign for lieutenant governor, and it's not specifically about the lieutenant governor's race, except for how it played into the entirety of the election and the election's impact on what we are doing for the mission of the TNM. So we're gonna cover that tonight, and so get ready, because I'm getting ready to hit you with a whole lot of information. So just be ready. But as we came out of the election on March the 1st, there were lots and lots and lots of questions, right? And we're going to just take a few of these and break them down and just see what you think, right? So let's take this one, because this came up that night, and I think it's a question everyone should be asking. Simply, how does a precinct have greater than 100% turnout? Now, this may seem like an odd question, right? It may seem like a strange question. But when you have an election that defies all reality, all expectations, has such a disconnect with what we all know to be the reality, you have to raise an eyebrow, right? Because we know what turnout is like. We heard throughout early voting that turnout was pretty paltry, right? And then election day, we heard a few things. But here's why we should be asking this question. And I'll pull up the graphic really quickly so you guys can see this, because I think it's and you'll have to forgive me because I have got a ton to show you tonight. Take a look at this graphic. Okay. Now, this is just in one race, right? Harris County, House District 138. And if you look really closely on the screen, what you're going to find is precincts, right? They say 362, 375 voting centers reporting. That's a precinct. And you're going to see some interesting numbers, right? You're going to see in this first column, you're going to see the number of the first column is the precinct number, obviously, but the second column is the number of registered voters in that precinct, and then the third column is how many voters from that precinct voted. Okay, so typical voter turnout numbers. Well, this one, looks pretty normal. I mean, it's kind of high. This first one, 18.46% for, for an election, right? For a primary election, because we know that it's generally pretty paltry. But when you go to the next precinct, there are only 3 registered voters in that precinct, and 67 of them turned out for a 2,233.33% turnout rate for that precinct. And then you begin to look at the rest of these numbers: 1,805%, 342%, 2,433%. And it just goes on and on to some of these ridiculous numbers of 24,800%. I mean, it's folks, it's classic insanity, right? But this is a question that people should be asking themselves. How in the world does a precinct have greater than 100% turnout? It doesn't seem possible because, frankly, folks, it's not. And so it definitely is something that people should be asking. And folks, this is not the only instance where this happened. In fact, and let me see if I've got it here for you. Here's one. We'll put this one up here. This was reported in CD 38, right? The congressional race. Look at these percentages: 6,871%, 9,257%. Right? So where did these votes come from? How does a precinct have greater than 100%? So if we're looking at the rundown for these particular races, I think it's important, if we're going to unpack this election, to ask the hard questions. And frankly, folks, this one's not that hard, right? We know from the standpoint of this election that the numbers didn't make sense, that suddenly there were weird votes here and there, and the percentages were off. But frankly, how does that happen? And I'm gonna tell you, this dovetails really into the next question, right? Because let's take a look at this one. Question everyone should be asking: how does a candidate lose votes after the counting starts? Now, it's important to note that this was, to me, the first tip-off that something was going on, right? Because we were tipped off by some of our volunteers that were watching the results come in on the Secretary of State's website. Okay. Now I'm gonna take you to a different screen really quickly, because I'm going to show you. This is how we have our stuff together. Okay, so this is from a report that was compiled by our good friend Claver Kamal Monty, right? Apostle Claver, my campaign manager. This is a report that was compiled, and the first thing that he did as he compiled the report was he noted that, and let me pull this up on the screen for you guys. Boom, and there. And I'll blow it up so you can see it. But the first thing that he notes on the report is this. It's that at 11:02, I called him up to, after I was getting bombarded by volunteers and supporters, that people were watching votes being taken away from us on the Secretary of State's website, right? So we would have a vote total, and then those votes would disappear. And so Claver actually documented all this, but rather than just dwell on that, I want to show you that ultimately it was not a unique phenomenon, right? In fact, it was being reported that very night. right here, this post on Facebook, someone else seeing that votes were taken away from Allen West. It's amazing, right? Votes were being taken away. And then we had this video surface, and this is a clip that, where Seth Keshel, many of you guys know who Seth Keshel is. He's been doing a lot of deep dives on the election from 2020. But here's a snippet of a video of someone who was talking about what Seth noted that happened in a particular race here in Texas. And here it is.
Exactly is going on here. Either one of two things has to be the case. Either one, our movement is not as strong as we've been thinking it is, and in fact, we're the minority, or the establishment uniparty is making sure that they rig the primaries against the grassroots candidates so that if there is a 2022 red wave, that it's one full of rhinos or the incumbents that are already there that we know aren't going to do anything to disrupt the agenda. And unfortunately, based on Seth Keshel's Telegram post, it seems like the latter is the case. Take a look. So we're going to take a look at 3 photos, and we're going to look specifically at Texas Senate District 11. So in this first photo, you can see Bianca Gracia leads the establishment choice, Middleton, by 1,200 votes going into Election Day. And then, boom, once Election Day counting begins, we see a complete statistical impossibility. So Middleton completely leapfrogs Gracia with 93% counted, where she gains 34,000 votes and Gracia only gains 4,000 votes. So what this means is that Gracia, who was in the lead by 1,200 votes, all of a sudden when Election Day counting begins, now she gets 1 vote for every 8.5 that Middleton, the establishment candidate, gets, which is absolutely, completely unheard of and impossible. But if you still need convincing, then you're going to want to see photo number 3. But first, I want you to note that Gracia at this point has 12,124 votes. And at this point, we have 93% of the votes counted. Now, with 100% of the vote counted, somehow, some way, Bianca finishes dead last. And look at this. So she started with just under 7,000, then went up to over 12,000, and finishes with under 5,000 votes. And what's worse is if you go back to picture number 2, look how many Middleton had with 93% of the vote in. 41,082. And here at the final count, Middleton didn't gain a single vote. So I'm not sure if you were able to follow all of that. It was a lot of numbers, but what we just saw is 100% impossible.
Wow. So let's pull this thing back down so I can see you guys. If I can. Wow. This is wonderful. There it is. Gee whiz. Another day in paradise. So we saw it happen in real time in my race. We saw it happen in the governor's race. There's an example of a down ballot race where it happened. And I suspect that there are other reports that are going to come in where this exact thing happened, right? This is not an isolated phenomenon. And so, again, the question is, once you start counting, how do you lose votes? How does that happen? The question, everyone, if we have fair elections, right, and elections that make sense, and we have a system that, in fact, you go vote and your vote gets counted, then how does it go down? How do your totals go down? How does that happen? Because, it seems that it only happened to the challengers and not to the people who ultimately won. So how does that happen? A question every Texan should be asking about our elections right now, about March the 1st, right? So let's move along to another question you should be asking. And this one, again, dovetails quite nicely with actually the first point and this one, right? Because if you look at the election numbers, right, across all sorts of data points, one of the things you're going to find is that right out of the chute, this election somehow managed to defy all statistical trends, right? I mean, beyond common sense, right? Because let's be honest, sometimes we look at things and we have a bit of a perception bias, right? But the numbers themselves don't lie. And when you begin to look at an election and you look at the statistics around an election, right? There's generally a pretty even curve from election cycle to election cycle, a distribution of votes. I mean, that's the way that it works. And you actually heard the gentleman in that previous video talking about the statistical impossibility, or frankly, I would say improbability of what we saw with Bianca's race. The impossible thing was when the votes disappeared, but the improbable thing was there. And it was just, you might as well take it off the table, right? But let's just start by looking at the first of these statistical trends. And what you see here is a spreadsheet that was sent to me that actually compares in several counties the voter turnout, right? The number of votes cast from 2018 to 2022, right? So midterm to midterm or statewide to statewide. So a 4-year gap. And amazingly, what you wind up seeing here is that, remember, they told us all that early voting was at a historic low, right? Remember, that was what we were hearing all throughout early voting, poll after poll after poll, even reported in the media, that early voting was low. But look at this. In some of these counties, like Galveston County, Brazoria County, or, take a Montgomery County, 49% change in early voting. 49%. I mean, we're not talking just raw on, right? I mean, this is 49%. This is not, excuse me, this is not in line with a normal trend from midterm to midterm. But what's even worse is look at the election day percentage change, right? Look at this. Some of these, Galveston County, 55% drop in election day turnout, right? 57% in Brazoria County, right? Denton County, 37%. For an and look at these overall changes. Now, from a statistical trend standpoint, this doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. So, that's really the start of it. I mean, again, it is the question: how does an election violate all statistical trends? Right? It just doesn't make any sense, right? But it's even beyond that, because I'm going to show you some numbers that were compiled by our campaign. And I want you to take a look at this. I literally just got this in just a few hours before the live stream tonight. But let's look at the statistics, right? So here we go. Here yet again. There had been what was essentially a hunch that the numbers from election day and early voting seemed way too consistent, right? Way too consistent. So what we did was we went and pulled, Claver did, he went with try to effectively either prove or disprove this theory, or at least add some information to the discussion, that there was some sort of algorithm in play that really all it did was double the early vote total, okay, to reach the election day total in the final results. So what he did was he took all of the races, right? Not all, but a chunk. He looked at the governor's race. He looked at the lieutenant governor's race. He looked at the attorney general's race, comptroller, ag commissioner, general land office, railroad commissioner, court of criminal appeals, place 5. Okay. And then what he did was he applied the math, right, to determine, okay, look, for each candidate, what did the early voting totals, what is the ratio of early voting to election day totals and the final results? Okay. And this is what he came up with. Look how terribly consistent these numbers are, floating right around double. A 2 means double. Okay. But look, 8 candidates, an average ratio of 2. 6 candidates, an average ratio of 2.016. Attorney General, an average ratio of 1.88, almost 2. Comptroller, average ratio, almost 2, almost 2, almost 2, almost 2, almost 2. So overall, for all races, the average was 1.912. 40 candidates, 9 races, and 12 candidates with a ratio of 2 to a little over 2, and which is 27. So here's the highest, here's the lowest, but this is a report. So tell me, again, if we're talking about violating statistical trends, right? If we're talking about this violation of trends, here's one thing that we know, just based off what we looked at a moment ago, this spreadsheet, right? Our total changes. Look at the early day change over 4 years ago, and look at this spike in early voting, even though we were told it was low. But yet what we had was election day totals that were effectively across the board almost exactly double what they were in early voting. It's a question everyone should be asking themselves. What was it about this election that violated all statistical trends, right? Anything you would ever expect to see. How does that happen? The short answer is it doesn't happen naturally. Okay. So, real quick question, because we've got to talk about this. What's happening with the audit logs from the electronic voting machines, right? Our first tip off on this was right here. State Representative Brian Slayton took to Facebook and posted, "Did you know many counties don't have early voting audit logs completed and submitted yet? Dallas County is one of them. Secretary of State is giving waivers to counties that don't have them." Well. That's an interesting thing, right? And hold that thought about the Secretary of State, because we'll be getting back to that here in a minute. But the disadvantage of electronic voting machines is that you have to rely on them to provide a copy of these audit logs so that you can check to make sure things were done properly, or you can spot things that were not done properly. But it doesn't cover things that we know actually happened, like in Tarrant County, where they broke chain of custody for the drives and handed them over to law enforcement in Tarrant County, where they promptly disappeared for hours and hours and hours before they were actually finally transmitted, right? And while many people want to talk about Harris County being the problem, understand that this is not just a Harris County thing. It's not just Harris County. It's a whole Texas problem everywhere. And we're going to talk about that more. So far, we've talked about many counties, right? We saw the irregularities here. Now we have Representative Brian Slayton talking about Dallas County. We had reports about breaking of chain of custody in Tarrant County, and we've had reports of irregularities all across Texas. So it's not just a Harris County problem, right? Not by any stretch of the imagination. And so as it stands right now, candidates that are trying to get to the bottom of this, and fair election advocates and election integrity advocates are trying their dead level best to untangle this mess. And here we go. We've got people that can't even provide these audit logs, right? So how are we expected to rely on these machines when we can't even get the part of the machine that exists to show us that the machine was not tampered with, that the vote totals that came out were the actual votes that came in. So it's a question everyone should be asking themselves, and frankly, asking their election judges. Do you have the audit logs, right? Ask the elections administrators, do you have the audit logs? Get your hands on them, okay? So let's move on with the questions, because I could be here all night long, trust me. But let's get down to this, okay? We've gotten past the statistical trends, right? We've talked about the audit logs, but let's talk about this, because it was just in that particular post, and we're going to talk about the first report that we got of an irregularity in this election, okay? So how did the counties violate the law and get away with it? Now, when I say they violated the law, I'm fairly certain that the inability to produce those audit logs is against the law. I'm fairly certain a break in the chain of custody, if it's not against the law, it really should be, right? But let's talk about this. Let's talk about the counties, okay? Because here's something that was posted today. Brenda Cash over there in Lavaca County talks about, there was actually an article that was posted on Current Revolt. Brenda Cash, who lives in Lavaca County, where our good friend Mark Myers as county judge was unseated. This is what she posted. She said, Lavaca County has 11 precincts. The Secretary of State webpage for Lavaca County voting day numbers has 2 precincts, which has a message which says no report submitted for these 2 precincts. Our county election administrator states they were submitted. On the Lavaca County website page, all numbers and data are present. Our data does not match Secretary of State data, and trying to get this corrected before the canvass may be impossible. Now, I'm not saying that the county violated the law, but it does make you question, where is the disconnect? Particularly when you look at what happened in Bell County. As a matter of fact, Bell County, and this gets down to specifically the very first report that we had something was hinky in this election. The first day of early voting, we had 2 reports. Well, technically, we had 1 report, and I'll get to the second one here in a second. But in Bell County, we heard that the ballots were not sequentially numbered, right? We got a report, and they said that's a violation of the law. I had to look it up, right? I wanted to make sure that if it is indeed a violation of the law. And so we looked up the Texas election code, and it's like, well, wait a minute. How in the world are these counties, what is this thing with the ballot numbering, right? So I came across this article, and I'll pull it up for you. This was actually included in the Waxahachie Daily Light, and it specifies right here, Chapter 52.062 of the Texas Election Code requires the ballots prepared by each authority responsible for having the official ballot prepared shall be numbered consecutively, beginning with the number 1. Now, that's in quotes. It's in quotes, which means it's the law. Es la ley. It's the law, right? So we're getting these reports, first starting in Bell County, of counties not having their ballots sequentially numbered. Well, this report in the Waxahachie Daily Light, and I'm going to tell you, these guys here in Ellis County did it right. They appropriated the money, got the proper ballots. But here's what it says. In other words, 1 pre-numbered ballot is printed for every single registered voter in the county. However, and this is where it gets important, a waiver from this requirement is available for counties that use approved voting machines, which utilize randomly numbered ballots. Well, wait a minute. A waiver. A waiver. The law says the ballots prepared by each authority responsible for having the official ballot prepared shall be numbered consecutively, beginning with number 1. Now, the last time I checked in law, shall meant mandatory, not discretionary. not may, but shall. So who do they get these waivers from? Well, it turns out that they get the waivers from none other than the unelected and appointed by the governor Secretary of State. And apparently the Secretary of State has been handing out waivers like they're handing out candy at Halloween. AKA, you want to know how counties are getting by with violating the law? Go to your Secretary of State and find out about the waivers that are being issued. So, not saying that the counties are getting the waivers from the Secretary of State, not saying the Secretary of State's giving the waivers. I'm saying that if the counties are violating the law and they're being allowed to do so under the color of law, they're doing it with the blessing and the rubber stamp of the Secretary of State's office. Now, who does that affect, right? I mean, when did the Secretary of State become the final arbiter of the law? Who said that you can obey it and you can disobey it? And when is it okay for the person who is running elections statewide, when is it okay for them to waive off something that guarantees or at least gives a higher degree of confidence in our elections? Right now, remember, this is not just about my race. This affected everyone, all of us. So these statistical anomalies, too many people voting in precincts, more people voting than you have, registered voters. You've got candidates losing votes, right? You've got candidates who basically have it in the bag when early voting starts, only to get completely crushed. You wind up in fourth place when early voting is when election day arrives. When you have election day turnout that is generally about a third to a half of what it was 4 years ago, but a big spike in early voting, but yet it's still the historically low, right? So what are we to believe here? What are we to believe? So how do they, if counties are indeed violating the law, how do they get away with it? Well, they got away with it either under the cover of darkness or under the cover of the Secretary of State's office, who is appointed by the current governor. Now, I wish I could absolutely unpack every single thing that we have uncovered because, my friends, there's so much, right? I mean, we've literally already been on here 45 minutes and I've shown you things that should make your skin crawl, right? This should send a shudder down your spine. And I have, literally shown you things that you would expect to see in a banana republic or a third world dictatorship, right? This is not to mention the fact that we saw actually my ballot order change in Wise County, right? From what my position was, where it was drawn, to the ballot, the actual sample ballot, to what appeared on the electronic ballot on the electronic voting machines, where it swapped places in the middle of early voting. Right? Haven't even talked about how Andy Hopper, who by the way, is within about 80 some odd votes of beating Lynn Stuckey. That will probably go to a recount, right? But we didn't even talk about how somebody got on Andy's property to intimidate him and shot his dog, right? Or to intimidate Shelley Luther while she's out on the campaign trail, cut her fences and let her animals out, prowled around her house and scared her daughter. We're not even talking about that. We're not even talking about the nonsense at the polls, right? We're talking about the actual fairness of our elections. And so if you will indulge me for just a moment, I'm going to hit one question that is specifically about my race. Because actually, this did not occur to me until I was sitting in the airport in Houston, getting ready to fly out to New Hampshire, and happened to use one of the computers at the kiosk where I'm sitting there having coffee to look this up. But one question, because if you notice that so many of these guys won by massive percentages, and that includes Dan Patrick. Dan Patrick declared the winner in this race, 75%. It was all in the bag for him, right, according to the election results. But one of the questions that I think we all should have is, you don't get to 75% in the last 3 or 4 days, right? If they're a lock, remember, because Trump endorsed him and all those sorts of all that crap that they told us, if he was already over 75%, why would he spend $2.5 million on a statewide TV buy? Right? Because this really speaks to how we all felt about and what we knew to be true about the race. And this kind of applies as well to the gubernatorial race or to, frankly, any of the down ballot races, right? Ag commission. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? Land commissioner. These guys who won by large numbers, there was polling to show to the contrary, particularly from people that were turning out, right? They were showing up. They were turning out to the polls. So what I did was I went back and I looked at Dan Patrick's TEC reports. And this is what I found. I found in January, he paid for a poll. Now, the way that these are typically conducted is if you have a relationship with a pollster, you ask them to conduct it, they give you the results and an invoice, and you pay for it, right? So what we have here is we see that he commissioned a poll in January and then turned right around with that poll in hand that should have shown him way above everybody else, right? Given the results that happen on election day, if they're accurate. And then immediately turning around and spending $2.5 million on a statewide TV buy. Now, something to bear in mind here, folks. If you're up by 25 points over the middle, over 50%, there's not a snowball's chance in hell that you're going to get taken down, right? Not a snowball's chance. You're going to get taken down. And you're getting ready to go into a general election, probably against the Democrat that you only beat by 5 points last time. Why would you blow $2.5 million on a TV ad? Right? It's not because he wanted to drag out his old pickup again. Right? So it defies logic, much like the stories that we heard about his internal polling, Greg Abbott's internal polling showing they were both underwater. All the signs, all the motions, all the things they did indicated that they knew they were underwater, that they had to fight like hell or they were going to end up in runoffs. And then suddenly, a week or two before early voting starts, they're calm. Everything tamps down. They got it in the bag. And then we got what we got. So, again, just questions you should be asking about this election. Questions that, frankly, everyone is asking about this election right now. So, as we go through this, and I'm going to get to pretty much the next steps, right? Because I've heard from candidates up and down the ballot that they are not going to take this lying down. They're not going to. We've already seen one press conference where Bianca Gracia is joined into a lawsuit against the Harris County elections administrator. There is some discussion about what's going to happen up there in Hopper's race. And there are other candidates that from governor on down the ballot that are not going to take this lying down. And I'm going to tell you, for those critics out there that may scream that this is sour grapes, it's not, right? There might not be a single chance in hell that any of this stuff will ever pan out and that suddenly I would end up in a runoff with Dan Patrick. But you see, That is not the point. The point here is much larger than this election, and it goes back to what I said at the very beginning of this. It is not about this race. It is not about a single campaign. It is not about a single election cycle. This is a movement, right? This is a much bigger thing than this one deal. And if I never got another vote out of this whole thing, it would not matter, because what matters most is the same reason that we fought like hell to give the people of Texas a vote on Texit, right? It's the same thing, the exact same reason and rationale is that if they don't represent us, then they can't represent us. And if these elections are not elections, but rather selections, then how could we ever go to sleep at night and think that we live in a constitutional republic? One problem is an anomaly. Two problems, that's a challenge. But all of these problems together, that's not a trend, right? That is the collapse of a constitutional republic. And frankly, folks, I'm fired up about this. And I think it's important. I think it's important to understand why this is, right? Because the question becomes, well, what do we do now? What is it that we do now? As individuals, as an organization, as a campaign, whatever it is, what do we do now? Well, let me tell you this. I committed a long time ago, August 24th, 1996. You've heard it probably till you want to vomit. But I committed August 24th, 1996 to see Texas free and independent, or until a gravedigger pats me in the face with a shovel. And I'm going to tell you right now, while our continued relationship in the Union is still the greatest existential threat to Texas, the cancer that is growing within our own government that would call what we just went through a fair election, that's just as big a problem. And if you think about it in these terms, right? If we want to get and win a vote on Texit, then we have to make sure that this crap stops, that these people are held accountable. And you see, it's wholly consistent. It's wholly consistent with what it is that we do. You see, I will show you this. Our mission in the TNM is this. While people focus on the political independence aspect of it all the time, the fact of the matter is we have a holistic mission. But beyond the independence aspect of it, right from our website, it's to restore and protect a constitutional republic. Well, folks, if we have no reliable elections, how can we have a constitutional republic? But it's also to restore and protect the inherent rights of the people of Texas. And need I remind you of what one of those inherent and inalienable rights is, right? Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution. All political power is inherent in the people. And more importantly, to this particular subject, all free governments are founded on their authority. So how does the government derive its authority? Well, it gets it from us. And we delegate that to our representatives at the polls. But if we have these elections that we cannot feel comfortable that they are conducted fairly and accurately, then how can that be a free government? How can it be? And it goes on to say the faith of the people of Texas stands pledged to the preservation of a Republican form of government. So I'm going to tell you, the pledge that I took August 24th, 1996 still stands, right? If you ever thought, if these numbskulls in the political establishment ever thought that some crap like this was going to break us, they're lunatics. That is the stupidest thing they could have ever done. If this is indeed pans out and all of these questions that we asked, and it is, is when they get answered, and if it's as nefarious as it looks, This is literally the worst thing they could have ever done, right? Because, for a Texian, for somebody who is not a Texian, this kind of stuff could break their spirit, right? It just suck the spirit right out of them. They'll go back and get in a ball, suck their thumb. They'll wow on social media. But you understand, they stepped on the toes of the people that have pledged their lives, their liberties, and their fortunes and everything else to a free and independent Texas, to upholding Article 1, Section 2. All they did was poured gas on the fire. Now, I'm going to tell you, there are going to be some people out there who say, oh, well, that showing was just terrible for Texas. Well, let me just remind you something, right? Numbskulls, Texas was not on the ballot, right? It wasn't there. Daniel Miller is not Texas. And if you're using me as a proxy for the Texas vote, why not use any of the slate of candidates, the pledged candidates that were there, aka our people? Look, let me show you. Here are the heroes. Here are the heroes that put their lives on hold to go out, that pledged to give every Texan a vote on Texas. So if you want to look at a referendum on this, look at these faces and tell these people, right? Look at the votes that they got, right? If you want to use this as a proxy, let me just go ahead and tell you something. Then you got to take somebody like Sid Miller here, who won his race, who signed the pledge, right? And James White, who was the co-author of HB 1359, the Texas Independence Referendum Act, right? Those two combined, I mean, it was insane. It was literally 1.68 million, right? 1,680,000 Texans voted in the Republican primary statewide for Texas' first pro-Texit candidates. Right? So if the naysayers out there are going to play fast and loose with my race being the proxy for Texas, got to make it fair, right? Fair's fair, square, square. Look at all the races. Look at all of them. Make those a proxy too. And what you're going to find out then is a majority of the people that voted in the Republican primary wanted Texas. But here's the thing. That only works if you believe that this election was conducted fairly and that the results that you read on the Secretary of State's webpage are indeed accurate. You can't have it both ways. You can't. So, that being said, I know exactly what I'm going to do next, right? Because I said it at the very beginning. If I did not win, that's what was going to go down. I was going to go out there and keep fighting for Texas like I've always done. But I want to draw your attention to something. And I thought about playing this tonight, but I'm running out of time. Maybe if I run over time a bit, you guys won't mind. But I took a section from this book, the audiobook version of it, right? And I have it in video form, and I tell you what, rather than play it tonight, I'm going to just direct you over to YouTube, right? I'll have it uploaded to YouTube directly. But essentially, the chapter talks about short-term thinking and the credibility gap. And it tells one of the major problems that we have as Texas supporters, one of the biggest obstacles that we have to overcome, because people ask all the time, if we are at the numbers that we're at, why can't we get this done? Well, that's it. So, this is indeed part of the challenge that we've got. So be looking for that on the YouTube channel. It is the chapter from Texas, Short-Term Thinking and the Credibility Gap. But let us not forget, folks, that when anyone says that this election was the most secure that we've ever had, just remind them of this.
Tape before y'all set it up.
I didn't understand what you said. What did you just say?
Okay. With this election, you can vote in any
No,
precinct.
you said the Republican side is not what?
I don't have staff, so we are closed right now.
So for the Democrat, I can vote Democrat then?
You can vote Democrat if you
But
want
not
to.
Republican.
Not Republican, I'm sorry.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Seems fair, right? Unreal. So, friends, here's what it boils down to. As we get ready to move through this, there are things moving. Candidates are talking. There's actions being taken. Hold the line and keep the faith, right? This, I do not believe, is over yet. But we have to look beyond, right? We have to move, and we can't be thinking about just the next thing in front of us. We've got to be thinking about all the things that are coming ahead. For example, great news, right? We've gotten reports from all over Texas that the Texas resolution was introduced and passed at precinct conventions, and they're getting ready for county and SD conventions. And so we're headed for another very public floor fight, it looks like, during the Republican state convention. Let's see them try to control 9,000 delegates in person. Yeah, let's see how that works out for them. Because it didn't work out so well last time that happened. So let's just see what happens there. But you see, it's more than that, right? If we want to fight this, we have to do the things necessary to fight it and fight it right. So you go look at this and remember, when we launched the effort to run candidates, via the, find T&M folks to join the Take Texas Back program, we scrambled. And the thing is we made a declaration at the same time the Texas bill was filed during the last session. We made a very public declaration that it was our intention to recruit, vet, and train candidates because our ultimate goal was challenge every incumbent, every election, right? Now, we had a good start, right? We had lots and lots of candidates across a whole bunch of state level offices, but we didn't get there, right? We can't put guns to people's head and make them run for office. But let me tell you something. The ones that did, I cannot thank you enough. I cannot express my gratitude to you for fighting through what was arguably one of the most difficult election cycles in recent history. You guys went out there and you made a stellar showing, and you advocated for the principles of Texas nationalism, the independence of Texas, political, cultural, and economic. You advocated for the things that matter to Texans. And for that, for you going out there and being the tip of the spear, I cannot thank you enough from the bottom of my heart. I can't. Because for many years, I thought it would, I never thought I would see candidates like in this number. But we had over 90. And it's still going on. So rather than wait till the last minute, understand that the fight starts now. The fight starts now. It's time to step up and honor these people that ran. And I'm sure there are people that ran in this cycle that are ready to go back at them again, because we don't ever let up. We never let up. This is the thing. Water defeats stone 100% of the time, given time and pressure, right? We don't ever let up. And so while we work this election integrity thing, we need candidates. While we go out there and fight the fight to make sure that our election's secure, and by God, we're going to be demanding paper ballots from here on out because these voting machines have got to go. They got to go. But it's going to be paper or bust. No more of this garbage. But if you want to join the fight, you want to get in this fray, and I'm going to tell you, people have already been asking me to declare that I'm going to run again. I don't know. I might. But I'm going to tell you, every one of these people needs to be challenged. Start now. Go to taketexasback.com/run for office and let us know that you are in. Additionally, something that we absolutely need you to do. It's this. If you spotted any election irregularities during whether it was early voting or during election day or since, drop us an email at electionfraud@thetnm.org. That's electionfraud@thetnm.org. We've already had emails come in about, frankly, some pretty disturbing things. So be sure to reach out to us. We are looking for anything and everything, right? Whether it was polling location irregularities, whether you saw some fraud taking place, some violations of election law taking place, if you were perhaps a poll watcher, we are trying to aggregate as much data and coordinate with other campaigns. And we all want to make sure that we put our information in the middle of the table, right? And so the more reports we have, the better off we're going to be. I'm also going to say this, because this is also important. As a movement, we got to get really big, really fast. Because if we're going to fight this the way that it needs to be fought in the next legislative session, it starts now. So, number one, I want you to join the movement, right? Become a member of the TNM at tnm.me/join. That's tnm.me/join, right? And find a local group, right? If you go to tnm.me/local groups, you got to get organized locally. If there was one thing that would have helped all of the campaigns out there, the pro-Texit guys, it would have been to have really tight-knit, active, vibrant local groups they could plug into. And so go find a local group, get plugged in. Go to tnm.me/local groups. And if there's not one in your area, organize one, right? Our field director, I should have put a picture of Paul Roby up here. He is licking his chops to help you, right? Organize a local group. Go to tnm.me/local and volunteer to be a local coordinator. And beyond that, if you don't want to organize, you don't want to lead, but you want to be a set of hands, here's what you got to do. Just become a volunteer. Go to tnm.me/volunteer. Or if you just want to be that person who kind of passively helps out, sharing links and things like that, here you go. Go to the Take Action Now page on the TNM website at tnm.me/action. That is tnm.me/action. But here's the final thing I've got to tell you tonight, because I am way over time. And I told you, I could talk maybe 30 minutes to an hour on every single issue. I mean, there's so much more. Screenshots you didn't see. Just data out the wazoo. That you should all be questioning right now what needs to happen. But I need you to plug into the TNM's website. We're going to give you action items where you can help us do this, but you should be hopping mad. You should be calling the Attorney General's office. You should be calling the Secretary of State's office, not emailing, calling and tell them, I don't trust this election. We need a do-over. Do it right this time. How about we go paper ballots? But here's the thing. You need to get some perspective. You need to get mad, and you need to get serious, right? The perspective for us is this. We had some wins. We got, even with all of these irregularities, we had some wins. We had some wins in the precinct conventions, and we've got things to be excited about. But you also need to get mad, right? Because when they take our elections away from us, when they take away our ability to elect our own people and they turn it into a selection, this is no different whatsoever than living in some third world country or some banana republic. So you need to get mad about it. But you don't need to just get mad and shake your fist. You need to turn around and use it to get serious, to do the things necessary to become the change that we need, to make the changes that we need, right? And we'll be talking more about that as we move along. But it's important. It's absolutely important that as we move forward, we never forget why we're here. It was never about one election. It was never about one campaign. It's about winning the battle. I mean, think about what would have happened if the Texan army would have said, after the Battle of the Alamo, said, "Oh man, I'm just so discouraged. Sorry, I'm out of here." Well, you know what? 60% of the Texan army washed out between the start of the revolution and San Jacinto. 60%. You don't want to be those 60%, right? But what if all of them had said, I'm just going to, too much. I just can't deal with it. I'm so disheartened. Absolutely not. The Texian army took the battle cry. Remember the Alamo. It was on their lips, shouted from their lungs as they marched on the Mexican army and obliterated them on the plains of San Jacinto. And that, my friends, is how you win. That's what we do. We prepare, we train, and then we fight, and then we win. And yeah, I'm not happy about what happened March the 1st. I'm not happy about what happened in this election. But there are only two things in this life you control: your attitude and your effort. My attitude is spot on. And my effort is going to continue to be 100% until we get the job done. And I would hope that you would be the same. So if you are with me, sound off in the chat. Drop me an email. Let me know. Go register to be a volunteer. Start a local group. Do something to get in the game, because sitting on the bench or sitting on the stands is not going to win this thing. You got to get in, and you got to be prepared to fight it out, and you got to get the job done, right? We got enough cheerleaders. We got enough. Now we need some players. We need some soldiers on the battlefield. Is that going to be you? With that, I am way over time. So for tonight, I will sign off with the words that I sign off with every single live stream. And now I won't have some political consultant in my ear telling me not to do it, even though I did it anyway, because I don't listen to political consultants. They're the kind of people who create the kind of crap that we just lived through, right? So it was Sam Houston who said that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. I believe that time is now, and the question is, will you stand with her? Good night, everyone.
Well, the people in power, whether red or blue, they could not care less about Texas, me and you. They created this give me country that don't value hard work. For a Texan to survive, all we need are some seeds and dirt. Texan, arise, don't you hear your call? You got to save your country, for it's long gone. Texan, arise, don't you hear your call? You got to save your country, for it's long gone. We believe in family and we value our community. Gladly lend a helping hand to a neighbor in need. And we don't believe that government should provide for all of society's needs. No, it's the pride of a Texan to give to others voluntarily. Texan, arise, don't you hear your call? You gotta save your country, for it's long gone. Texan, arise, don't you hear your call? You gotta save your country, for it's long gone. Our tax dollars, and they love our natural resources. They don't want to see us driving trucks, they'd rather see us riding horses. And now they want to ban our guns, you know, especially the ones that look scary. But may I remind you of the Gonzales Cannon and the Alamo heroes we buried. Texan, arise, don't you hear your call? We got to save our country, for it's long gone. Texan, arise. This is straight from the Texas Constitution, Article 1, Section 1 and 2. Look it up. Texas is an independent state, yet presently we suffer. We no longer possess the right to locally self-govern. And now it's time as a people in which all political power is inherent. And in such manner we find expedient, we reform or abolish our government. I said, Texas in a right.